What's up, nerds? Welcome to Pirate Radio, the Enterprise IT podcast. This week's guest is former Chief Software Officer for the U.S. Air Force and Space Force, Nicolas Chaillan. Nicolas has sounded the alarm that the U.S. Department of Defense is in danger of losing the AI race if immediate action isn't taken. We also discuss the threat of failure to adapt to private sector companies and the importance of DevSecOps and remaining competitive. Nicolas Chaillan, thanks for being here. Welcome to the Pirate Ship.
Thanks for having me.
You've had a eventful couple months here. You've been on major media. Left the position, high ranking within the DoD. But I want a little bit of the backstory. How you got there. Give us a background on sort of your personal story. How you became the Chief Software Officer for the U.S. Air Force and Space Force. Frankly, at such a young age.
Sure. I guess I was a fluke, coming from the commercial side and being born in France. I created my first company back in France. I was 15. I moved to the US 11 years ago. I founded 12 companies. So I grew my companies to 12 countries and, wanted to make a difference. So I started first at DHS. I was a chief architect and special advisor for cyber, where I pushed zero trust at DHS. All to here. It was too early 5 years ago. And then I got a call saying, hey, do you want to come and bring DevSecOps to DoD? And I started at OSD for Miss Lord, the Undersecretary of Acquisition and Sustainment at the time, 3 years ago. And with the success of the initiative we created on DevSecOps and the excitement we were seeing, Dr. Roper at the time decided to create the Chief Software Office, and I was appointed the first ever, I guess, Chief Software Officer in the U.S. government, and started 2.5 years ago at the Air Force and created the Chief Software Office and built enterprise capabilities. And I guess, my background is, of course, as an entrepreneur, but also a developer and cyber expert. Created a lot of world premiere innovation capabilities, about 187 that I sold to 45 Fortune 500. So I know how to build and get things done. And that's what we've done in the last 3 years.
Well, that's awesome. We meet with folks every day who are struggling with the switch to traditional IT infrastructure to DevSecOps. Your background in startups, the definition of a startup is there is no culture, right? You're creating it as you go alongside the technology. So being dropped into large bureaucracies, the DoD. How was that? What sort of struggles did you see there? I mean, it's hard to impact large culture. We watch that every single day. What was your experience like?
Yeah, obviously it's a very different beast. You're looking at the largest organization on the planet with also the largest budget and teams, also the largest amount of silos, and quite honestly, the least amount of agile and modern training. And so between silos and egos, even it's a big challenge to get things done at scale. I think you can do a lot of good in pockets, but when you want to try to really change the entire ship, I think it's a very heavy lift.
You watched Walmart struggle with Amazon as they started encroaching on their market share. The U.S. Department of Defense doesn't have any competitors from a delivery perspective. They've obviously got global competitors, but they don't have that same pressure and the requirement to shift immediately or disappear like you do in the private sector. There was a 10-year period there where you watched the train wreck, of Amazon stealing Walmart's lunch in slow motion, and they had to make that change and adapt, and it's but only the folks that do it right are going to survive, right? And they've made a lot of progress now. And but yeah, the DoD being the largest organization on the planet, I mean, you've got your work cut out for you, or had your work cut out for you.
Yeah, and I think there is obviously very significant competition. Russia is certainly
Yep.
one that we think about, but really China is the most scary actor. 1.5 billion people, waiting for us to wake up. Whether U.S. officials and the Pentagon leaders are too complacent to realize it. The fact is they're leading in many of the sectors. You look at AI, cybersecurity, and many other fields. You've seen it again in the last couple of weeks with the work on quantum computing and even the hypersonic missile, where the
Yep.
U.S. only launched 9 of them, and the Chinese are in the hundreds. The velocity of innovation, the pace of IT, and particularly the fact that software is now leading when it comes to rapidly innovating and delivering capabilities, continuously at a pace of relevance. That is something that we are vastly, underfunding. We don't have the basics of IT, between basic connectivity, cloud capability, data fabric, DevSecOps adoption. DevSecOps is to this day not even mandated for new programs, which is borderline criminal. And in the meantime, you see, when I compared the the quote I used to create myself on the commercial side, something that would cost $50,000 on the commercial side costs $500,000 in DoD. So we think we spend more money. We feel good about how much we invest as taxpayers in DoD, but we don't really realize the tremendous amount of waste. 10 cents on the dollar pretty much is going to somewhat of tangible outcomes, and even that because of the adoption of waterfall as the only way to do business. These 10 cents are often stuck in time 5 years behind. So many would argue that even those capabilities are dated by the time they get delivered.
It's not just the famous $900 toilet seat within the government. There's also all the infrastructure supporting IT.
Yeah, it's everything we do, right? Even weapon systems are effectively monolithic. There's very little reuse. If you compare to a SpaceX, right? SpaceX has 200 developers for the 9 platforms of SpaceX, able to reuse 80% of the code across the 9 platforms. The code is very modular and reusable, which makes it very efficient. If you compare that with, F-35, 4,000 developers, only 4% of the code reused with F-22. SpaceX can update software the day before the launch. Meanwhile, F-35 is barely capable of doing this, every few years. That's just not good enough.
And then I've seen some of your comments and thoughts around the silos that exist within the DoD, right, between Air Force, Army, Navy. How do we fix that? How do we get the different branches of the military communicating?
Yeah, there are multiple problems there. First, Congress is funding things in such a very precise, granular fashion, not enabling capacity of work and really funding programs down to each individual program, with not understanding that in 2021 and even before, cloud layers and transport layers and big data and whatever else, and DevSecOps, of course, should be funded centrally as enterprise services and capabilities. And so we've not been able to do that. So it makes it very complex to create enterprise services. On top of that, you pile, silos across the departments and multiple redundant capabilities. We found, dozens of clouds and different basic IT infrastructure across the department. Often, many being completely redundant. And then you see also egos getting in the way, with the new Army CIO started, maybe a year ago now, and ended the partnership with Cloud One, the Air Force Cloud. That's the largest implementation of cloud in the department with, hybrid cloud, Amazon Azure, IBM, Google, and Oracle. And, ending that engagement, all to create their own contract vehicle and their own cloud office. And of course, never partnered with us when it comes to DevSecOps and Platform One. That's a massive waste of taxpayer money. Hearing the Army CIO say, "Oh, it's just healthy competition." He doesn't even understand who is supposed to compete with, right? Against.
Yep.
We should be competing against China.
Yes.
And honestly, with the lack of talent we have, and the fact that it's already very difficult to retain and attract people, you're just compounding the problem by creating more silos of basic IT capabilities. This is not hard. This is not something that should even be seen as complex. This is basics of life. I understand if we have to compete on maybe more advanced capabilities, but we're so far away from that, right? It's like if you compare Elon Musk trying to go to Mars, we're stuck in the mud trying to even figure out how to walk, and people are babbling all day about flying and going, to the moon and to Mars, but maybe we need to first get rid of the mud.
So this conversation is definitely on brand for you. High candor and visibility. You've done Ask Me Anything events on social media. How impactful were those in enabling you to deliver, within the Air Force and Space Force? Having that kind of candor, was that all designed to help with a culture change and
Yeah.
change things internally, or was it simply a matter of trying to get people to wake up?
It's a little bit of everything. It's also who I am. I'm not playing a game, but
Yeah.
I have a tough time, I guess, playing politician and bureaucrat. So I'm just being honest with people, and I think the taxpayer should demand this and demand more transparency. People in DoD, call what I'm doing an operational security risk, OPSEC. OPSEC was mostly created to make sure that government leaders are never held accountable when we mess up. That's a good excuse. China obviously knows very well everything I'm talking about. They, if that's where we think they're going to get their information, we vastly underestimate their intelligence capabilities. So it's kind of a joke, right? And at the end of the day, being able to wake up both, the defense industrial base and also attract companies that want to do business with DoD. I brought countless hundreds of companies and startups that were never going to do business with the department inside of the department, streamlining their accreditation process and their contracting actions so we can get access to best of breed capabilities. And that's foundational to the success of the department. You're so locked into very few players in that DoD bubble. Government officials leaving end up working in the DIB in the same mobile, again, not even seeing the velocity and what's happening on the commercial side. Look at, again, SpaceX, where if it were not for SpaceX, which NASA made fun of when they decided to create reusable rockets at the time, we would still be using Russia to send American astronauts to the international space stations, right? If that's not a disgrace, I don't know what is. And the taxpayer spending $750 billion a year on the department should demand more transparency in terms of failures. I've seen programs fail year after year, billions wasted, mostly because of the wrong basic understanding of agility and how to innovate, with the fear of failure being so high that we see now, China leading in cybersecurity, AI, and hypersonic implementations. But we were the first one to get there. But then DARPA was completely forbidden to fail. But if you talk to Elon Musk, right, he's going to tell you the reason why SpaceX is able to move so fast is he has no fear of failing. The key is to make it small incremental failures and very controlled. You don't want to, be stupid and shoot all over the place, but you also don't want to have such a fear of failing that you never innovate.
Yep. Yeah. It's amazing what SpaceX has been able to do, and I've watched some documentaries on them, and their willingness to make mistakes is kind of inspiring. Their willingness to do things that don't work, but fix them quick and move on, which we would hope the Department of Defense could listen to. So you've been a huge proponent of avoiding vendor lock-in and leaning on open source technologies to create your stacks. This again is probably much easier with a startup than with the U.S. Department of Defense, who has massive commercial contracts, technologies that they've been historically married to. Did you find it difficult to move the culture towards open source during your tenure?
Honestly, that wasn't the biggest problem. I guess when I pushed, the platform on stack, and we even open sourced all the work we've done in DevSecOps, and that's probably the largest ongoing contribution to open source by the U.S. government. We have 5 nations using it now, dozens of agencies outside of DoD, and countless commercial organizations contributing to Platform One open source code base. The entire stack is based on open source, so that's also exciting to see. Excuse me. And so we see a massive adoption of open source, and some people, of course, are worried about, hey, we're open sourcing a lot of great insights, but that's also enabled the reuse and enabled the partnership with the commercial side. So we're not building DoD stuff, we're building innovative stuff that can be reused across verticals. That's very important in software to enable scale and get people excited about what's going on. So, I think that's something to pay attention to. And I've not got as much pushback as I thought I would. A lot of people were pretty excited about doing it. I think what you're going to find is a lot of the Pentagon teams are just waiting for someone like me to show up and take the lead and take the hit also if something goes wrong. But they're willing to. They were excited to do this, and they were eager to do it. I think there's just no one leading or having the awareness of why this even matters.
Yep. And you've mentioned too that some of the partnerships with the private sector aren't where they need to be. I presume you were talking about like the Googles, the sort of big tech folks that maybe aren't playing a large enough role with national defense. Can you talk about that a little bit, and where those relationships are, and what needs to happen?
Yeah, of course. So, Google dropped Project Maven a few years ago, which was this, drone vision capability, which potentially could have prevented the horrendous mistakes that were made in Afghanistan recently, where we bombed the 7 kids. And people fail to realize sometimes that, this is not about making weapons that kill people. It's a deterrent. It's also potentially saving lives, avoiding mistakes like this by having better capabilities. And so, when a few Google employees, very short-sighted, living in their own Silicon Valley bubble, decided to complain about Google working with DoD, Google decided to, to not renew the contract, which is the same than canceling it. And then, of course, Google responded to my comment saying, "Oh, we have plenty of contracts with DoD." Well, that's true, but that's not exactly true, because it's all business contracts. There's no engagement on the weapons side, real meaningful engagement on the weapons side. When I asked a question to Google leadership in a meeting with 20 plus general officers, I waited the 55th minute to see if someone else was going to have the brain and the will to ask the question. But they didn't. So I asked the question myself, saying, "Hey, can we actually use, your capabilities on weapons? And, they said, well, as long as you follow the terms and conditions, we're completely fine with you using our products. That's just a sneaky way not to answer the question, or actually to answer it, saying no, because if you read the terms and conditions, it's very clear you can't, use the capabilities to arm people. I'm pretty sure a weapon is going to arm someone, ideally the right target. So it's a little bit foolish to say that, right? And effectively, we're also part of the problem, because we overclassify all of the information we know about, what China is doing that's malicious and a threat, an existential threat to the nation. And I think if people were aware and tracking how bad this is, and the fact that if we don't wake up by December 2022 and we don't take action now, we have no chance of even catching up, and that the CCP is not waiting for us to figure it out, and they're not a friendly nation whatsoever, they will take action. They will take proactive action against Taiwan and others. And if we have no ability to defend ourselves, the vision of what America is today is going to go down the drain, and you better start learning Mandarin, right? People, I think, would take action. They would wake up and want to join us and participate. And I'm sure countless Americans would be willing and eager to come and help proactively. But because we can't really share enough, people think it's just this mythical thing, but they need to see tangible evidence,
Yep. We unfortunately like to wait for an event, right, to get everyone to wake up.
Yeah, I think that the issue in the past, with those events you're talking about, is the technology gap was not too bad. So we were able to, through honestly putting our warfighter lives at risk and tremendous courage from these people, we're able to overcome some of these issues. But I can tell you, when it comes to most advanced AI, every time we put an AI capability on the jet, the best US pilots lost every single time. So, there's a difference here where the technology is getting so good that humans are not even able to comprehend how this works. And so we need to stop being foolish and realize that, hey, if you wait by the time it is too late, or there is such event, you're just not going to be able to fix it. It's too late.
So what does the US DoD need to do to, from a software perspective, to regain a global leadership position?
Well, the first step is to invest in our people and empower our people and get out of the way if you don't know what you're talking about. That's always a good first step. First, mandating agile training and continuous learning. I was giving an hour a day to my people to learn and catch up. Very important to invest in agile training. Most of the leadership does not understand what is a 22-year-old concept, which I used when I created my company, when I was 15, and I'm 37 now. So clearly we need to invest in agile training, mandate it, and make that the norm, and ban earned value management and all this outdated waterfall nonsense. That's first step. Second step is to create a few joint teams and empower, someone to come with experience, not just degrees or number of stars on their shoulders, but someone that has done something like this before. You can't put someone in charge of a cloud for 4 million people in the air gap, most complex security environment, when they never even ran a cloud for 20 people in their basement. That just makes no sense. They wouldn't even get an interview for the job at Google, right? So we need to create a joint team reporting to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, create an IT agile, team that will have a few value streams. So the first one will be on cloud, and the second one will be on transport and connectivity. There will be one on DevSecOps. There will be one on data fabric. There will be one on AI/ML. And we need to merge the talent from the best services, stop the redundant work on cloud and all these things that I just mentioned, and pick the best of breed and run. And it's not a one size fits all. You have to think of it as a company inside of the government. The government becomes the integration office and product owner. We never put a single prime on contract. Platform one has 35 companies on contract. Every value stream is comprised of a mix of talent. that's where we want to be. We want to have that mixed talent. We want to have the government leading integration, so we're not getting locked in abstraction as a foundation, DevSecOps, to continuously deliver value in production across all of these enterprise capabilities, so we can move at the pace of relevance using ruthless automation. So it's going to run across all classification levels without any gaps. That's the kind of basic steps, baby steps that someone like me could have taken in 6 months and fixed the entire basics of life of IT. That's the plan I proposed to fix what we see now as a total debacle.
Yeah, I've watched, I've walked out of buildings in the private sector where I wanted to short the stock, knowing that they had no future because the folks at the top weren't willing to adopt and change, right? They like the way they do it. There's a mainframe in the basement and it's fine. They're not bringing things to the cloud. They're not doing DevOps. They're not doing, open APIs in some instances, things that are going to allow their product to flourish in the year, frankly, 2015 and beyond. It's scary to think of that, those attitudes existing within the Department of Defense.
Yeah, maybe you have a point. Maybe we need to create a DoD stock. Maybe
that's it.
Saw how bad it was. The leaders will not be able to hide it anymore. You see all these reports from GAO and others saying, "Oh, the Air Force is now, drastically behind." And there was another report recently again, and the report was a little bit short-sighted because it was focused on the Air Force capability of those jets and bombers, which I argue in the next wars will not be the the capabilities that will save us. It's going to be cyber offense, space, and cyber defense, of course, as well. And I think, fifth generation fighters will not matter as much as we think they will. And so that's also the issue you see, right? Is the leadership has been trained for 40 years to think of these weapons as foundational. They have a tough time take a step back and try to rethink what will be the next ability to compete.
Well, Nicolas, I sure appreciate your time. I personally really appreciate your willingness to do what you've done and step out and be critical and bring attention to problems within the U.S. federal government and the Department of Defense. Shining a light, and it feels to me like you're trying to make a positive impact in a different way, from outside the organization. Thank you for your service within the Air Force and Space Force, and your willingness to do what you're doing and get the word out.
Thanks for having me. And this really has been the biggest honor of my life, to serve the warfighter, because people forget who is here to do what. Pentagon leaders should be here to serve them, not the other way around, and I think they should not forget that.
That's fantastic. It's great to hear folks that are coming from the federal government that have that attitude, and I know there are lots of them, but that's great to hear, and hopefully folks are listening, and collectively between the private and the public sector space, we can get our act together and continue to have the role that America plays in global geopolitical space.
No, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Nicolas.